Detroit blizzard. A blue-eyed CEO collapses at a bus shelter as a 9-year-old lifts a crumpled note. "Pick me up, Dad, before the snow." Is it his? The heater in the bus shelter gave a weak hiss before going silent, leaving only the moan of the wind. Snow swept through broken seams of the glass, covering the bench where a small boy sat bundled in an oversized jacket. His gloved hand shook as he pressed a crumpled piece of paper against the frosted pane. The words, scribbled in pencil, faint but stubborn, read, "Pick me up, Dad, before the snow." Through the blur of white, headlights glowed. A sleek black sedan pulled to the curb, tires crunching against the frozen street. The door opened, and a man stepped out, a figure more suited to boardrooms than blizzards. His Italian suit was dark as night. His white shirt unwrinkled despite the storm, and his silk tie fluttered like a ribbon caught in the wind. He pushed back his coat's collar and removed his gloves, revealing a prestigious watch that gleamed even in the dim light. For a moment, he just stood there, taking in the note taped to the glass. His breath misted. His blue eyes, sharp, intelligent, narrowed with recognition he couldn't quite name. The child looked up, startled but calm. "You shouldn't be out here," the man said, his voice firm but not unkind. "I'm waiting for my dad," the boy replied. His tone was simple, steady, like he'd practiced those words before. The CEO stepped closer, scanning the small figure, the too big coat, the snowflakes caught in dark curls, the boots patched with duct tape. His chest tightened, though he couldn't say why. "How long have you been waiting?" The boy shrugged. "Since the heater stopped." The wind rose, sharp and angry. The man felt it cut through his suit. He hadn't meant to stop here. He'd been driving from the airport to a meeting at his Detroit headquarters, but the car's navigation had rerouted around a blackout zone. Now, here he was, standing in snow up to his shins, staring at a child with a note that made his pulse stumble. He pressed a hand to the glass. "Where's your mom?" "At the clinic," the boy said. "Her shift's late, phone's dead." The CEO opened his mouth to reply, but his breath hitched. A deep, involuntary tremor ran through him. The combination of the cold and months of exhaustion caught up all at once. He staggered, catching himself on the edge of the bench. The boy reacted instantly, grabbing a mylar blanket from a nearby emergency bin. "You're freezing," he said, wrapping it around the man with small, competent hands. "You need warmth on your wrists? That's where the blood moves fastest. My mom says so." The man could barely focus, but he nodded, letting the boy press hand warmers against his skin. The sound of sirens echoed faintly in the distance, swallowed by the wind. As consciousness flickered, he looked again at the note, the faint pencil lines, the looping letters that seemed oddly familiar. The world narrowed to that paper, that small face, and the words that somehow reached deeper than the storm. Then everything went dark. A deep hum pulled him back from the edge. The man's eyelids fluttered open to a strobe of red and blue lights reflecting off the snow. His throat burned from the cold. But a steady voice anchored him, small, calm, determined. "Sir, can you hear me? Stay still. Help's coming." The boy's mittened hand pressed the mylar blanket tighter around his shoulders. A dispatcher's voice crackled faintly through the boy's phone. "We've got your location, kid. Stay put. Ambulance ETA, 8 minutes. 8 minutes. In this wind, it felt like forever. The man, his breath ragged, forced himself upright, but dizziness clawed at his vision. You called this in?" he managed. "Yes, sir. My mom's a nurse," the boy said, tone matter-of-fact. "She taught me what to do if someone's too cold. Keep 'em talking. Keep the blood moving." He pressed another warmer against the man's wrist, wrapping it with practiced precision. "Hold this. It helps." The man obeyed, studying the boy through the blur. The kid's face was pale but steady, his dark eyes focused. He couldn't have been more than 9, but the way he moved, the way he cared, it was like instinct. A gust slammed the shelter, shuttering the glass. The man winced, drawing the blanket tighter. His mind, usually so sharp, struggled to find order. He thought of the schedule he was supposed to keep. The investor meeting postponed, the emergency alerts pinging his phone about the citywide blackout. Then the boy's words cut through. "You're from the company that made the electric buses, right? The ones that keep people warm when the power's out?" The man blinked. You know about that?" "Yeah," the boy said softly. "Mom says your buses save lives." The CEO managed a weak smile. "We try." He reached for his phone, fingers stiff and trembling. The device recognized his face and unlocked. He whispered a short voice command, his voice low but steady. "Activate Detroit Winterlink. Priority reroute. Convert idle fleet to V2L heat stations. Deploy within 5-mile radius." A confirmation ping vibrated faintly in his hand. Command accepted. He watched as small icons, miniature buses, appeared on the glowing map. They began to move, crawling toward community centers, churches, and shelters. Within minutes, dozens of people would have warmth again. The boy leaned closer, watching the screen in wonder. "You can just tell it to do that?" "Sometimes," the man murmured. "You just have to tell the right thing to listen." For the first time, the boy smiled, a real one. "Then tell it to come here too." The man hesitated, thumb hovering. Then he nodded and spoke again, voice firmer this time. "Reroute nearest fleet unit. Current coordinates." The device chirped. "ETA, 12 minutes." The boy let out a small breath, fogging the glass. "12's not so bad." "Not so bad," the man echoed, though the tremor in his voice betrayed how much strength it took to speak. Outside, the snow thickened. Sirens were closer now, but still distant. The man leaned his head back, eyes half closing, his body shivering under layers of thin heat. Through the haze, he felt the boy's hand rest lightly on his arm. "You're gonna be okay, mister," the boy said softly. "We just need to wait a little longer." The man wanted to answer, to thank him, but the words caught in his throat. His gaze drifted again to the crumpled paper still taped to the glass, its faint pencil lines trembling in the wind. Something about that handwriting refused to let him go. The sirens grew louder, but the CEO's focus stayed fixed on the storm outside, the kind of storm that made even streetlights vanish into white. The boy crouched beside him, holding the phone so both could see the glowing map. A pulsing blue icon inched toward their coordinates. E-bus number 412. Wintergrid prototype. ETA. 7 minutes. The man's fingers tightened on the blanket. He was used to dashboards, not blizzards, to high-rise conference rooms, not the freezing ground. But here, with this boy and a note that haunted him, it felt like the world had narrowed to one small shelter of breath and hope. "You said your mom works at the clinic?" he asked, voice rasped but steady. The boy nodded. "Night shift. She's good at everything, even people who can't pay. She just helps." The man's throat tightened again, from something that wasn't just cold. "She sounds extraordinary." "She is," the boy said proudly. "She says you have to help people even when they don't see you." A sharp gust rattled the glass, cutting through the silence that followed. The man stared at the boy. So small, yet carrying the calm of someone far older. His mind drifted to the projects his board had called cost-inefficient. Heat pods for shelters, microgrids for low-income zones, the kind of things that never made quarterly reports shine. He looked at the note again, the fragile paper trembling in the draft. "Pick me up, Dad, before the snow." Something stirred deep in his memory, pulling at a corner of time he'd tried to seal off. The handwriting, those curved letters, it wasn't just familiar. It was the same. He reached inside his wallet, pulling out a small, time-worn ticket stub, creased, faded, protected behind a clear sleeve. A bus ticket. The same looping C on the corner. The same smudge of pencil where someone had pressed too hard once, long ago. The wind howled again, but he barely heard it. His pulse thundered in his ears. "Sir?" the boy asked, watching his face. The man swallowed. "Where did you get that paper?" "Mom saved it from a bus ticket," the boy said. "She told me to use it for notes, said it brought luck once." He tried to smile, but it faltered when he saw the man's expression, a mixture of awe, confusion, and something almost fearful. "Did she ever tell you where she got it?" the man whispered. The boy shook his head. "Just said she met someone on that bus. Someone who changed her life." The man's breath caught. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold passed through him. Outside, the low hum of an electric motor broke the storm's roar. Bright light cut through the white wall of snow. The bus had arrived, its headlights glowing like two suns in the blizzard. Warm air whooshed as the doors opened, steam curling around them. Volunteers waved, calling for passengers. The boy grinned and turned back. "It's here!" The man rose slowly, still dazed. "Yes," he said softly, "it's here." He followed the boy inside. The cabin was bathed in amber light, soft heat filling the space. People huddled under blankets, sipping tea poured from stainless thermoses. The hum of the electric heater sounded almost like a heartbeat. The boy guided him to a seat near the window. "You should rest," he said. But the man didn't sit yet. His eyes lingered on the note taped outside, the storm easing around it. That small square of paper had somehow led him to warmth, to a boy, and perhaps, impossibly, back to something he thought was lost forever. He finally sat, the boy beside him. The bus door hissed shut. The world outside vanished into swirling white. "Sir?" the boy said, tilting his head. "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" The man gave a faint, fragile smile. "Because maybe I have." The bus rolled through streets buried in white, its windows fogged by breath and warmth. Inside, the boy leaned against the heater vent, eyes half closed with exhaustion. Volunteers moved quietly down the aisle, distributing cocoa and blankets. The CEO accepted a cup, his hand trembling as the steam rose. He sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the motor steady beneath them. Then, almost without realizing, he pulled the crumpled paper from the window, folding it gently, like it might tear under his fingertips. The faint graphite letters trembled in the flickering light. "Where did your mom say she met that person on the bus?" he asked softly. The boy looked up. "She didn't. Just said he never came back." The words landed heavy. The CEO's throat tightened, his pulse loud in his ears. He traced the looping initial again. It wasn't just handwriting, it was her signature style, the same small flourish at the end of each letter. He remembered a cold night years ago, a broken-down bus, a woman with warm eyes and a scarf that smelled of cedar. They had talked for hours about everything and nothing, music, kindness, what Detroit used to be. She'd laughed when he said technology could warm the world. He'd kept her bus stub as a quiet reminder that warmth wasn't always electric. And now, staring at the boy beside him, he felt time folding in on itself. He took a deep breath, voice barely above a whisper. "What's your last name, son?" The boy hesitated. "Thompson." The name hit him like a chord he hadn't heard in years, so familiar it ached. He looked down at the note again, at the faint pencil scrawl that ended with the same looping T, his chest filled with quiet, stunned recognition. He turned toward the window, snow flickering past the glass like static. "I've seen this handwriting before," he said under his breath, more to himself than to anyone else. "What?" the boy asked. The CEO managed a thin smile. "Just remembering someone." A volunteer approached. "Sir, your hands are still ice cold. Do you want us to take you to Mercy General? You may have mild hypothermia." He nodded faintly, but his gaze remained fixed on the boy. "Only if he comes to," he said. The volunteer hesitated. "He's not family." "He's my responsibility until his mother arrives," the man interrupted, calm but firm. His tone carried quiet authority that made people listen without question. As the bus turned a corner, blue emergency lights flashed through the fogged window. An ambulance idled at the next intersection, waiting. When the driver opened the door, cold air rushed in again. The man helped the boy zip his coat and guided him carefully down the steps. Snowflakes clung to the boy's eyelashes. The man adjusted the boy's hood. His movements almost instinctive, protective. They climbed into the ambulance. The medic checked vitals, speaking softly into a radio. "Sir," the medic said, "you're lucky that kid knew what to do. Blanket, warmers, the call, textbook survival response." The CEO looked at the boy, whose small fingers fidgeted with the edge of his mitten. "You did all that?" The boy nodded shyly. "Mom says don't wait for grown-ups to fix things. Just do what's right." The man smiled faintly, heart tight. "She sounds like a very wise woman." "She is," the boy said. "She's at the hospital tonight." The man's breath caught. "Mercy, General?" "Yeah," the boy said, eyes lighting. "She's a nurse there." For a long moment, the CEO said nothing. The ambulance jolted forward, siren wailing against the storm. He turned toward the window. Eyes wide, the paper note still clutched in his gloved hand. If the boy's mother was who he thought, if that looping T truly belonged to her, then fate had just rerouted his life more powerfully than any algorithm ever could. The hospital entrance glowed like a beacon through the snow. Sliding doors hissed open as the ambulance rolled up, hot air rushing out to meet the blizzard's sting. The CEO stepped down slowly, his breath still uneven, the mylar blanket draped over his shoulders. The boy hopped beside him, boots squeaking against the wet tile. "Stay close," the man said quietly. The boy nodded, eyes wide at the chaos of stretchers, coats, and rushing staff. Inside the triage bay, nurses called out vitals, while a generator hummed overhead, the only thing keeping the lights alive. The man's suit was soaked, his shirt clinging to his frame, but he carried himself with the same steady composure that once commanded conference rooms and investor calls. A nurse guided them into a small cubicle curtained off from the hall. She checked his pulse, pressed a thermometer against his ear, then frowned at the low reading. "Mild hypothermia. You'll warm up in an hour or two," she said. "You're lucky he was there." The man turned to the boy, voice low. "Yes, I'm beginning to realize that." He watched as another nurse wrapped the boy in a fresh blanket and handed him cocoa from a vending machine pot. The boy took a sip, grimacing. "It tastes like burnt marshmallows." The man chuckled softly, an unfamiliar sound in his own throat. "I'll take your word for it." The curtain swayed as an orderly stepped in with a clipboard. "Sir, we'll need your name for the report." The man hesitated, unused to being asked rather than recognized. "Cole Mercer," he said. "Arcturus Systems." The nurse's eyebrows lifted. "The tech company with those electric buses?" He nodded. "That's the one." She smiled faintly. "Well, your buses are keeping a lot of people alive tonight, Mr. Mercer. Half the shelters lost power." Cole looked toward the window, where snow still battered the glass. "That's why we built them." A vibration buzzed in his pocket. His phone, flashing notifications. He silenced them all except one. A system alert from Wintergrid. All emergency heat units deployed successfully. He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time all night. Beside him, the boy shifted on the chair, his small fingers tracing circles in the condensation on his cocoa cup. "Will my mom know where I am?" he asked softly. "We'll make sure she does," Cole said. "What's her name?" "Clara Thompson." The sound of it hit him like a pulse of electricity. For a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe. Clara, the woman from the bus, the woman who'd laughed softly when he said he believed in warmth you could build. He hid his reaction behind a calm expression, but inside, old memories roared to life. Her hand brushing his coat sleeve, her voice promising to write, the night the bus broke down near Campus Martius. He had waited for that letter for months. It never came. The nurse returned with a clipboard. "We'll call the clinic to locate Ms. Thompson. She's on staff tonight, I think." Cole managed a nod, but his heart pounded like it wanted to break through his chest. The boy tilted his head. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Cole said softly, though his voice betrayed him. Minutes later, the curtain swept open again. The nurse's tone was brisk but kind. "Mr. Mercer, your vitals are improving. You can rest here until you're fully warm. And, good news, your friend's mother is on her way up from the clinic wing." The words hung in the air, charged with more meaning than anyone else in the room could grasp. Cole sat perfectly still, the note burning in his palm like a living thing. He didn't know whether to brace for hope or heartbreak. Then, through the corridor noise, he heard footsteps quicken, and a woman's voice calling, "Ethan!" The boy jumped from his chair. "Mom!" Cole turned toward the curtain just as it swept open. A woman stood there, hair dusted with snow, hospital badge swinging from her neck. And, for the first time in nearly a decade, Clara Thompson met his eyes. For a few seconds, the entire emergency bay seemed to hold its breath. The noise of gurneys and monitors faded, replaced by a single sound, Clara's quiet inhale. She froze at the sight of him. Her eyes, the same deep hazel he remembered, widened in disbelief. Snowmelt dripped from her hair onto her clinic badge, which swung slightly against her scrubs. "Cole," she whispered, as if saying his name might break the moment. He rose to his feet, the thin hospital blanket slipping from his shoulders. Beneath it, his crisp white shirt was half unbuttoned, the faint outline of his watch glinting in the fluorescent light. He looked exactly as she remembered. Taller, sharper, but with the same stillness in his gaze. "Clara." The single word carried years of silence. Ethan ran to her. Wrapping his arms around her waist, she knelt and hugged him tight, trembling with relief. "I was so scared when they said you'd gone out alone." She stopped, glancing at Cole again. What are you doing here?" His voice faltered. "I found him at the bus shelter. He helped me. He saved me, actually." She blinked, trying to process it. "You?" He gave a small nod. "Looks like fate's got a strange sense of direction." Her expression shifted. Shock, disbelief, then something colder. "You shouldn't be here." He took a cautious step closer. "I didn't plan this, Clara. I was on my way from the airport when the storm—" "Stop!" Her voice was soft, but it cut through him. "You had 8 years to come back." "You didn't." Cole's chest tightened. "I never left by choice." "Then what?" she asked, trembling slightly. "You just forgot?" He met her gaze steadily, the storm in his eyes no less fierce than the one outside. "No, I thought you did." They stood there, the distance between them thick with everything unsaid. Ethan looked between them, confused but sensing the tension. A nurse peeked through the curtain. "Ms. Thompson, we've got incoming frostbite cases. Need you in room 4. Clara swallowed hard and nodded. "I'll be there." She turned to Ethan. "Stay here with Mr. Mercer." Her tone stumbled slightly on his name. When she left, Cole sat back on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. For a man used to controlling outcomes, markets, projects, entire cities, this was one variable he'd never learned how to master. Ethan climbed into the chair beside him. "You know my mom?" he asked quietly. Cole hesitated. "A long time ago," he said. "Before you were born, I think." The boy studied him for a moment. "Did you make her sad?" Cole looked at him, startled. "Why do you ask that?" "She doesn't talk about before," Ethan said softly. "Only after." Cole's throat closed. He wanted to say 100 things. That he didn't know she'd tried to reach him, that he'd searched for years, that every winter still carried her shadow, but all that came out was, "Maybe I did." Ethan frowned, thinking. Then he reached into his pocket and handed Cole a folded piece of paper, the same one that had been taped to the shelter glass. "She said if I ever felt lost I should write this, that one day someone would read it." Cole's eyes blurred as he smoothed it open again. "Pick me up, Dad, before the snow." The words felt like both a plea and an answer, circling back after all the lost years. He looked up. Through the thin curtain he could see Clara in the hallway, her scrubs streaked with melting snow, her hair coming loose, her voice calm as she gave orders to a trauma nurse. Still helping. Still strong. Still her. The past had found him in the middle of a storm, but this time he wasn't running from it. He stood slowly, holding the note like a promise. Cole waited by the curtained bay long after Clara disappeared down the hall. The rhythmic beeps of heart monitors filled the quiet. Ethan had dozed off in the chair, curled under a blanket, his cocoa cup empty on the tray table. Outside, the blizzard had softened to a heavy drizzle, but the city's hum was still muted. Power grids down, buses working overtime to keep shelters warm. When Clara finally returned, she looked exhausted. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and faint dark circles framed her eyes. She paused at the curtain, unsure whether to step inside. "He's asleep," Cole said softly, not looking up from the paper in his hand. She hesitated, then entered, closing the curtain behind her. "You should be resting too. The doctor cleared you hours ago." "I know." His voice was steady but low. "I just didn't want to leave without seeing you." Clara crossed her arms, defensive by instinct. "You've seen me. Now what?" He met her gaze. "Now we talk. 8 years late, but we talk." Her expression flickered. Pain, anger, disbelief. "You think it's that simple? You disappear. I raise a child alone. And suddenly, fate drops you at a bus stop. So now we talk." "I didn't disappear," he said, leaning forward. "You stopped answering." Her eyes flashed. "No, you stopped." Cole reached into his coat pocket and retrieved his phone. He swiped to a folder marked Archived Personal, an old backup synced from a long-forgotten account. He scrolled, lips tight, then handed it to her. "Clara, I didn't get your messages." She took the phone reluctantly, frowning as the screen displayed a timeline, her name on dozens of unread messages, all marked, filtered by assistant. Her breath hitched. "Your assistant?" she whispered. He nodded grimly. "Julia. She thought she was protecting me. From distractions, she said. I fired her after the audit. But I didn't know this part until tonight." Clara's fingers trembled as she scrolled through her own words from 8 years ago, pleas for a callback, for clarity, for help when she found out she was pregnant. She covered her mouth, silent tears welling. "You never saw any of it?" "No," he said quietly. "Not one." Her breath came unevenly. "I thought you knew and didn't care. I thought you moved on." The room fell still. The hum of the hospital faded again, leaving only the sound of Ethan's soft breathing. Cole's voice broke the silence first. "You named him Ethan." She nodded, wiping at her cheeks. "After my father." He smiled faintly. "Good name." Clara's walls wavered but didn't fall. "You built empires, Cole. You could have looked harder." He didn't flinch. "You're right." He leaned forward, his tone calm but aching. "I built everything except a place to come home to." For the first time she looked at him, not as a ghost from her past, but as a man sitting in front of her, tired, humbled, and maybe still in love. "Why now?" she asked softly. "Why find me now?" He unfolded the paper note between them, smoothing its creases. "Because he taped this to a bus shelter, and I couldn't ignore it, and because the universe apparently doesn't care about my calendar." Clara let out a faint, disbelieving laugh through her tears. Cole looked down at Ethan, sleeping soundly in the chair. "He's brave," he said. "He's kind. That's all you." She followed his gaze, her shoulders softening. "He's curious, too, always trying to fix things bigger than him." "That might be me," he admitted quietly. For a long moment, they both just watched the boy breathe, their walls melting as slowly as the snow outside. Clara finally spoke, her voice steadier. "We'll need proof, Cole, not just words." He nodded without hesitation. "DNA test, legal chain of custody. I'll do it right." Her eyes searched his. "And if it's true?" He exhaled deeply, emotion roughening his tone. "Then I start over, on your terms and his." The curtain rustled as a nurse passed by, but neither of them moved. The note lay between them on the bed, small and fragile, yet stronger than all the years apart. By morning, the storm had eased to a steady snowfall, quiet and deliberate. From the hospital window, Detroit looked like a sketch in gray and white. Buses idling as orange-vested volunteers helped families board, power lines glistening with ice. The world felt slower, gentler somehow, as though exhaustion had calmed the whole city. Cole sat in the family waiting room, still in the borrowed hospital sweater a nurse had handed him. His phone buzzed with notifications, missed calls, investor texts, a dozen board messages demanding explanations for the unsanctioned emergency reroute of company vehicles. He silenced them all. For once, the world could wait. When Clara appeared in the doorway, her scrubs replaced by jeans and a parka, her expression was cautious but calmer. She nodded toward the hallway. "We're set for the test. Lab opens early, thanks to the blackout crew staying overnight." Cole stood. "Thank you for agreeing." "I didn't do it for you," she said softly, though her tone carried no venom. "He deserves to know." They walked down the corridor side by side, past nurses with coffee cups and flickering generators. The sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint sweetness of cocoa from the children's wing. Inside the small lab, a technician greeted them professionally, explaining the process: cheek swabs, double seals, strict chain of custody. Cole listened carefully, every word hitting with quiet gravity. Ethan sat on the exam stool, swinging his legs. "It doesn't hurt, right?" "Not at all," the technician assured him. "Just a cotton swab, quick and easy." The boy grinned. "I'm used to needles. Mom says I'm tougher than I look." Cole smiled faintly. "I can see that." When it was his turn, Cole took the swab with steady hands, following the technician's instructions. He caught Clara watching him, not coldly now, but as though trying to reconcile the man she remembered with the one sitting here, silent and precise, obeying every rule. The samples were sealed, signed, and time-stamped. The technician promised results within 2 days. "We'll contact both parties directly," she said, tucking the envelope into a secure courier pouch. When they stepped back into the hall, Clara exhaled as though she'd been holding her breath for years. Cole broke the silence first. "I'll respect whatever you decide, Clara. If you need space—" "I don't need space," she interrupted quietly. "I need truth and stability for him." He nodded. "Then that's what I'll give." They walked toward the cafeteria where Ethan was waiting with a breakfast tray. Oatmeal, orange juice, and a mountain of toast crusts shaped like squares. He looked up when he saw them, his grin bright and unguarded. "Did I do good?" he asked. Clara kissed the top of his head. "You did perfect." Cole sat across from them, his gaze softening as Ethan chattered about how the buses in the city were breathing now, his phrase for the heat hubs Cole had activated. "Mom said they used your buses to keep the old church warm," he said proudly. "That's pretty cool for a car company." "It's not really a car company," Cole corrected gently. "It's supposed to be a people company. We just forgot for a while." Ethan blinked. "How do you forget people?" Cole smiled sadly. "You stop seeing them, until someone reminds you." Clara looked at him for a moment, a small flicker of understanding crossing her face. Before she could respond, Cole's phone vibrated again. Board emergency session, 10:00 a.m. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Clara caught the hesitation. "You should go," she said. "You've got a company to answer to." He pocketed the phone. "Not until I make sure you're both okay." She studied him, searching for the old self-interest that used to guard his every word. It wasn't there. "We're fine," she said softly. "Go do what you do best. Just don't forget where you were last night." He nodded slowly. "I won't." As he turned to leave, Ethan's voice stopped him. "Hey, Mr. Mercer?" Cole looked back. The boy smiled shyly. "Thanks for picking me up before the snow." Cole's throat tightened. "You're welcome, son." He didn't mean to say son. It slipped out, unplanned but natural. Clara didn't correct him. And as he stepped into the crisp morning air, snow still falling in soft spirals, Cole Mercer knew the next meeting waiting for him would change more than any quarterly report ever could. By the time Cole reached his downtown headquarters, the morning snow had thickened again, blanketing the city in silver silence. The mirrored glass of the Arcturus Systems Tower rose above the frost, a monument to precision and progress. But as he stood in the lobby, shaking snow from his coat, something inside him felt different. He'd spent his life building warmth through data and circuits. Last night, a boy with duct-taped boots had reminded him what warmth really was. The boardroom was already full. 12 directors sat around the long walnut table, their screens alive with financial dashboards. His CFO, a polished man named Greg Dalton, leaned forward as Cole entered. "We need an explanation, Cole. The emergency reroute you authorized, 60% of our electric fleet, was off protocol." Cole took his seat at the head of the table, placing his phone face down. "It was necessary," he said simply. "Necessary?" Greg's voice sharpened. "You cost this company 7 figures overnight." Cole met his gaze calmly. "We kept 1,000 people alive through the storm. I'd call that an investment." A few board members exchanged uneasy glances. Another director, a woman from finance, spoke carefully. "We're not disputing your intentions, Cole, but there are shareholders to answer to. Public perception of mission drift could be—" He raised a hand. "Public perception is exactly why we exist. You all remember the founding statement. Technology that breathes for the coldest nights. Somewhere along the way, we stopped meaning it." He stood, walking to the wall screen. With one command, he brought up live footage from the company's wintergrid network. Shelters glowing with warm light, volunteers handing out food beside humming buses, children sleeping under thermal blankets. "This," Cole said, voice low but unwavering, "is our return on investment. The grid we built didn't just power lights, it powered hope. We're not walking that back." Greg leaned back, arms crossed. "And the shareholders?" Cole met his stare, blue eyes steady behind his glasses. "They can read about it in the Detroit Free Press when the story runs tonight. We'll launch a pilot, Wintergrid Detroit. Transparent, non-profit division. Funded at cost." The room erupted in murmurs. "You're making this public?" one asked. "Yes," he replied. "Because people don't trust silence anymore. They trust proof." Greg shook his head. "You're risking the company." "I'm rebuilding it," Cole said evenly. "We built tech that could warm cities. Now we'll use it to warm people." The tension in the room held for a beat too long. Then, one by one, the other directors began nodding. A woman from legal leaned forward. "If we formalize this pilot, we'll need the mayor's office on board." "They'll be ready," Cole said. "I've already spoken to them." He hadn't. Not yet. But he would. The meeting adjourned an hour later, quieter than it began. As the others filed out, Greg paused at the door. "Cole, you've always been a visionary, but vision doesn't always pay the bills." Cole slipped on his coat. "No, Greg, it pays something better." Outside, the storm had softened to a glittering mist. He took a slow breath, the cold air biting his lungs clean. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profit margins or investor calls. He was thinking about Ethan, curled up under a hospital blanket, about Clara's steady voice, sharp with anger and care all at once, about a note written in pencil that had survived 8 winters. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Clara, Ethan's asking if you'll visit after school, just as a friend for now." Cole smiled, small and unguarded. He typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." He looked up at the city skyline, where the hum of his electric buses moved through snow like steady heartbeats. Detroit was breathing again, and somewhere in its pulse, so was Hiway. Snow drifted gently against the tall glass windows of the small cafe across from Mercy General. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee and winter coats drying by the radiator. Cole sat in the corner booth, his overcoat draped neatly beside him, a single cup steaming on the table. He watched the door every time it opened, nervous in a way that felt strange for a man used to commanding boardrooms. Then he saw them, Clara and Ethan, walking in together. She looked more rested than she had the night before, though the shadows under her eyes hadn't disappeared. Ethan wore a bright blue hoodie and held her hand until he spotted Cole, then tugged free and waved. "You came!" Ethan grinned, sliding into the seat across from him. "I said I would," Cole replied, smiling softly, "and I don't break promises." Clara stood for a moment, hesitant before sitting down. "This was his idea," she said, removing her gloves. "He wanted to thank you." "You already did that last night," Cole said gently, looking at Ethan. "But I'll take another." Ethan grinned wider. "Mom says it's polite to thank people twice." Cole chuckled, the warmth of it surprising even himself. "Then your mom's right again." They talked for a while, about school delays, the snow still falling over Detroit, and the electric buses humming like quiet guardians across the neighborhoods. Clara mostly listened, occasionally smiling at how easily her son spoke to the man who only hours ago had been a stranger. When Ethan excused himself to use the restroom, silence settled between them. Clara traced the edge of her coffee cup, her expression unreadable. "He likes you," she said finally. Cole's voice softened. "I like him too." "That's what scares me," she murmured. He looked up. "Why?" "Because you walk into our lives like a storm. Powerful, unexpected, impossible to ignore." She glanced at him. "But storms always pass." Cole leaned forward, his tone steady. "Clara, I'm not going anywhere, not again." She held his gaze for a moment, searching for any hint of the man who'd once vanished from her world. "You say that like it's easy." "It isn't," he admitted, "but I'm learning that hard things are usually the right ones." She looked down, a faint smile tugging at her lips despite herself. "You've changed." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I just finally stopped pretending work could fill the spaces people leave." Clara took a slow breath. "You know, when I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to call you so badly. I didn't care about money, I just wanted you to know he existed." "I would have been there," Cole said quietly, "every step." Her eyes filled, though she blinked the tears away. "You can't rewrite the past, Cole." "No," he said, "but maybe we can start writing the rest together." Ethan returned, holding a napkin covered in sketches, a stick figure bus, a smaller stick figure boy waving beside it. "Look," he said proudly, "it's us. You and me and Mom waiting for the bus that breathes." Clara laughed softly, shaking her head. "He's been calling your buses that all morning." Cole smiled, taking the napkin carefully as if it were something sacred. "I like that name better than anything my marketing team's ever come up with." "See?" Ethan said. "I told you it's cool." Cole looked at him, then at Clara, his expression growing serious again. "I meant what I said about starting small. No big moves, no headlines, just time. Cocoa, homework, helping with shelters if you'll let me." Clara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "One step at a time." He extended his hand across the table, palm up. She looked at it, then placed her own lightly in his. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close to trust. Outside, a gust of wind swept past the window, scattering snowflakes across the glass. The city still looked frozen, but inside the cafe, warmth had quietly taken root. "Mom," Ethan said suddenly, "can you come by tonight? Just to see how the heater bus works near our street?" Clara glanced at Cole, weighing it. Then she smiled faintly. "If he brings cocoa." Cole's answering grin was soft and genuine. "Deal." That evening, the sky turned a soft violet as the storm clouds broke apart. The city glowed beneath a thin mist of snow, streetlights haloed, exhaust from e-buses rising like calm breaths into the cold air. Cole's sedan eased down the narrow neighborhood street, tires crunching over frozen slush. He parked beside a row of brick townhomes, where laughter echoed faintly through frosted windows. He carried a thermal bag in one hand, the rich smell of cocoa escaping into the night. When he reached Clara's door, his heart beat faster than it had before any investor pitch. He knocked once. Clara opened the door wearing a worn gray sweater, her hair loose and soft from the day's fatigue. Behind her, the small living room glowed warm with lamplight. Ethan's drawings, buses, snowflakes, smiling stick figures, covered the refrigerator. "You actually brought cocoa," she said, unable to hide the small smile tugging at her lips. "I don't make empty promises," he replied. Ethan bounded into view, wearing fuzzy socks and holding a screwdriver. "Mom, the heater bus is outside again, and the vent's rattling." Clara sighed, but Cole chuckled. "I can take a look." Outside, the E-bus idled softly at the curb, a mobile heat hub glowing amber through the storm-dark street. Steam drifted from its exhaust ports, warm and rhythmic. Cole knelt beside the outer vent and tightened the panel, gloved hands steady despite the cold. Ethan crouched beside him, watching intently. "How do you know what to do?" the boy asked. Cole smiled faintly. "When you build something from scratch, you learn to listen when it talks back." Ethan frowned. "Machines talk?" "In their own way," Cole said. "This one's saying thank you for keeping it busy tonight." The boy laughed, and for a second Cole saw a flash of his own grin reflected there. Easy, bright, unguarded. The sight hit him deep, in a place he hadn't felt in years. Clara watched from the doorway, arms folded, but her expression had softened. The sight of the two of them together, her son, this man she'd once loved, brought a strange ache she couldn't name. When Cole and Ethan came back inside, snow melting from their coats, Clara handed them each a mug. "You're both frozen." Ethan blew on his drink. "Mom, can I show him my project?" "What project?" "The winter bus tracker," Ethan said proudly, pointing to the tablet propped up on the coffee table. Lines and dots glowed across a map of Detroit, routes from Arcturus Systems' grid, overlaid with the neighborhoods that needed heat most. "I used your company's public data. I wanted to see which shelters get warm fastest." Cole leaned over the tablet, genuinely impressed. "You did this yourself?" "Mostly. Mom helped with the numbers." Clara shrugged. "He's been obsessed with your system ever since he learned who built it." Cole smiled, humbled. "Looks like I've got competition." Ethan beamed. "Maybe we can fix the bus routes together." Clara chuckled. "Let's start with bedtime first." The boy groaned, but obeyed, padding down the hall. Cole set his mug down, unsure whether to leave. Clara broke the quiet first. "You looked natural out there with him." "It's easy," Cole said softly. "He's something special." Her expression turned cautious again. "You don't get to fall into this overnight, Cole. He's waited his whole life without knowing you existed." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm not rushing. I just want to earn my place, one evening at a time." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the hum of the bus softened, its lights flickering gently through the window. Then Clara sighed, her voice quieter. "You know, he's always drawn that same bus, the one that breathes. I used to tell him it was his dad's idea." Cole looked at her, startled. "You did?" She nodded. "I wanted him to believe warmth could come from somewhere, even if it wasn't here yet." The words hit him like the first crack of sunrise. He stepped closer, his voice steady but raw. "Then maybe it's time he knows it finally arrived." Clara met his gaze for a long moment, then nodded faintly. "Maybe." In the reflection of the frosted window, their faces were faintly lit by the bus's glow. Two people who had spent years apart, now standing in the same quiet light. Morning brought a quiet brightness to Detroit. The storm had finally passed, leaving the city wrapped in clean snow that glittered beneath pale sunlight. At Clara's street corner, volunteers loaded fresh supplies into the winter grid buses, Cole's fleet, now officially deployed under emergency humanitarian status. For the first time in years, he felt the hum of his company's machines not as assets, but as something closer to grace. He'd barely slept. The DNA test results were due that morning, and his pulse quickened every time his phone buzzed. He tried to distract himself, reviewing project reports, signing approvals, but the world felt narrowed to one truth waiting in an envelope. When Clara called, her voice was steady but cautious. "The lab just sent word. They'll email results within the hour. Can you come here? I think we should open it together." "I'm already on my way," he said. By the time he arrived, the e-bus outside her building hummed like a gentle guardian. Clara stood by the window, a folded sheet of paper in her hand. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, drawing snowflakes in blue pencil. Cole removed his gloves slowly, his breath tight. "Do you want me to read it?" She hesitated, then nodded and handed him the page. He scanned the lines, heart hammering so loudly it almost drowned out the sound of the heating vent. Then he found the words, "Probability of paternity, 99.99%. His shoulders dropped. The world seemed to go still. When he looked up, Clara's eyes were already glistening. "It's real, then," she whispered. He nodded once, unable to speak. Ethan looked between them, confused. "What's real?" Clara knelt beside him, her voice trembling but warm. "Honey, this man, he's your father." The boy blinked. His gaze turned slowly toward Cole. "Really?" Cole knelt too, meeting his eyes level. "Yeah. Really?" For a second, Ethan just stared. Then, without hesitation, he lunged forward, wrapping his arms around Cole's neck. "I knew it," he said, muffled against his shoulder. Cole's breath hitched. He held the boy close, eyes closing as years of silence and misunderstanding washed away in a single, fragile embrace. Clara turned, pressing a hand to her mouth, tears streaking down her face silently. When Ethan finally pulled back, his smile was wide and wet. "Does this mean you're staying?" Cole cupped his cheek, voice thick. "If you'll have me." The boy nodded fiercely. "Mom says we can always use more help fixing things." Clara laughed through her tears. "He's not wrong." Cole straightened slowly, turning toward her. "I want to do this right, Clara. No shortcuts. Legal guardianship, shared responsibilities, counseling. Whatever you think helps him, helps us." She studied him carefully, the years of wariness softening into something closer to peace. "You'd really go through all that?" "I'd walk through another storm if that's what it takes." Her lips trembled into a faint smile. "Then start by having breakfast with us." He exhaled, smiling back. "That I can manage." They sat together at the small table, sunlight pouring through the window. Ethan chattered about his school project while Cole listened, nodding, his gaze soft and intent. Clara watched him. This man who once vanished without a word, now cutting toast for their son with the kind of care you can't fake. Later, as Clara washed the dishes, she glanced out at the street. One of the buses had stopped beside a nursing home, its doors open to the morning. Inside, elderly residents stepped into the warmth, hands wrapped around cups of cocoa. She looked back at Cole, who was helping Ethan label a map with colored pins. "You really are changing the city," she said quietly. He glanced up. "Trying to. One bus at a time." Clara dried her hands on a towel, her expression gentler than before. "You could have led from anywhere, Cole, but you came back here." He looked at her for a long moment. "Because this is where I lost the one thing I couldn't replace." She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't painful anymore. It was tender, cautious, hopeful. Outside, the city kept breathing, steady, rhythmic, alive again. Snow still glittered on the curbs, frozen in rippled ridges like the city was holding its breath. Inside the small apartment, Clara stirred a pot of soup while Ethan arranged his science project pieces across the kitchen table. Cole leaned against the counter, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, watching them both with quiet contentment. Detroit was thawing, not just the streets, but the people. Wintergrid had spread from a pilot to a movement. Every day, more e-buses were fitted with heaters, air scrubbers, and emergency power nodes. It was working. Families stayed warm, clinics stayed open, and for the first time in years, power outages weren't met with panic, but with community. That afternoon, the mayor's office called. "They're holding a press conference tonight," Clara said, checking her phone. "They want you there." Cole's expression tightened slightly. "Us, actually. You and Ethan." Ethan looked up from his project, eyes wide. Me? Why? Because you started all this, Cole said, crouching to his level. That note you taped to the bus shelter. It reminded me what all of this was really for. The boy blushed, ducking behind his paper models. I just didn't want anyone freezing. That's exactly the point, Cole said gently. Later, at City Hall, camera lights reflected off the snowmelt on the steps. Reporters swarmed, their voices a blend of excitement and skepticism. Clara stood close to Ethan, both bundled in matching scarves. When Cole stepped to the podium, dark hair swept neatly back, blue eyes clear behind his glasses, the murmurs faded. He didn't start with numbers or projections. Instead, he told the story. The shelter that went dark, the boy who left a note, the night a city found warmth not through luck, but through care. Behind him, screens displayed maps of the winter grid network lighting up block by block, like veins of gold beneath the city's skin. Detroit's not just surviving winter, Cole said, voice steady but full of emotion. We're rewriting what resilience means, starting from the foundation. Applause filled the atrium. Ethan clapped hardest, grinning so wide his cheeks hurt. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, pride mixing with relief. After the crowd thinned, Cole led them outside. Snow fell again. Soft, harmless flakes this time. The same bus that had rescued them weeks ago idled at the curb, its cabin glowing warm through frosted glass. Inside, it was quiet. A volunteer smiled as they stepped aboard. The seats were wrapped in fresh blankets. Steam rose from paper cups of cocoa. Ethan pressed his hand against the window, tracing the outline of their street in the distance. "This one's ours," he whispered. Cole looked down at him. "What do you mean?" "The bus," Ethan said. "It's where it all started." Clara smiled faintly. "He's right." Cole reached into his coat and unfolded a familiar scrap of paper, creased, water-stained, but still legible. "Pick me up. Dad, before the snow." Ethan's eyes widened. "You kept it?" "I did," Cole said softly, "because it reminds me what I almost lost, and what I found." The bus hummed forward, moving slowly past neighborhoods that now shimmered with soft, reliable light. Elderly couples waved from doorways. Children ran alongside, bundled in bright coats. The world outside looked different now, not because the storm had vanished, but because people had learned how to face it together. Clara leaned her head against the glass, her reflection meeting Cole's beside her. "You did it," she said quietly. He shook his head. "We did." Ethan sipped his cocoa, smiling at them both. "Does this mean we can call it our family bus now?" Cole chuckled. "I think that's exactly what it means." As the vehicle rolled through the night, the city lights pulsed softly in rhythm, each glow a promise that warmth would always find its way back. At the next stop, Cole knelt, holding the crumpled paper in his palm. Snowflakes landed gently on it, melting instantly in the bus's heat. Ethan looked up at him. "What are you doing?" Cole smiled, voice low but certain. "Answering it." He slipped the note into the boy's pocket and said, "You'll never have to wait in the cold again." Outside, the winter grid flickered alive across the horizon, a constellation of quiet hope stretching from block to block, home to home. And inside that bus, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and the hum of a city reborn, father and son watched the snow fall, knowing it would never feel lonely again. The night the city finally thawed, the streets glistened like liquid glass. Power lines hummed softly, rooftops gleamed under the pale moon, and for the first time all winter, Detroit didn't sound like struggle. It sounded like breathing. Cole stood at the top of the riverfront overlook, the same place where his company had once tested the first prototype bus. He wore no overcoat tonight, just his dark wool suit and scarf, his breath steady in the cold. Behind him, the skyline pulsed with soft light, every bus, shelter, and microgrid glowing in quiet unison. Clara arrived with Ethan bundled beside her, their footprints pressing side by side in the snow. The boy's cheeks were flushed with excitement. "They're all on, Mom. Every one of them." Cole turned, a faint smile breaking through his calm composure. "All of them," he said softly, "from the riverfront to Grandmont." Ethan grinned. "That's the whole city." "Almost," Cole said, kneeling so he was eye level with him. "The city's big, but so's your note." The boy laughed, shy but proud. "You really kept it?" Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a small frame, the crumpled note now sealed behind glass. "It belongs to both of us now." Clara watched them quietly, her eyes glimmering. "You could have put that in a museum." He shook his head. "Some things don't belong behind glass. They belong where they started, between people." They stood there together, watching the buses glide past below, their interiors glowing like moving embers. The Winter Grid initiative had spread faster than any projection. Public donations, volunteer engineers, even rival companies joining to expand it. The press called it the Warm Line. Cole's phone buzzed with another headline notification. Mercer's Winter Grid model adopted in 6 U.S. cities. He didn't open it. Instead, he tucked the phone away, turning toward Clara. "You asked me once why I found you now," he said quietly. "I think it's because I finally stopped looking at numbers and started looking for names." Her voice softened. "You mean ours?" He nodded, eyes bright behind his glasses. "Yours and his." Ethan looked up at them, confusion giving way to a shy smile. "So, are we a family now?" Clara hesitated, her hand brushing against Cole's. He didn't rush her. The years between them had taught patience. She nodded slowly. "Yeah," she whispered. "We are." Cole exhaled a trembling breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He reached for her hand fully this time. Fingers warm despite the cold. Below them, the lights shifted, the city grid synchronizing into a slow wave, each streetlight brightening and dimming in rhythm. Someone at headquarters must have initiated the display, a kind of citywide heartbeat. Ethan gasped. "It's breathing." Cole smiled. "Just like it's supposed to." The boy pointed toward one glowing bus stop, the same one where it had all begun. "Can we go there, just for a second?" They walked down together, their boots crunching softly in the snow. The shelter's glass still bore faint marks from the storm, tiny cracks that caught the light like silver threads. Inside, heat rolled gently from the vents, wrapping around them in quiet comfort. Cole crouched beside Ethan. "Do you remember what you wrote that night?" The boy nodded, grinning. "Pick me up, Dad. Before the snow." Cole's eyes glistened as he pressed a folded slip of paper into Ethan's hand. "Then it's my turn to write one." Ethan unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat but strong, the pencil marks firm. "I picked you up, and I'm never letting go." Clara's breath caught as she read it over his shoulder. The boy smiled so hard his eyes crinkled. "Can I keep it?" Cole nodded. "Always." He knelt lower, pulling Ethan into a hug, firm, steady, and full of everything words couldn't say. The boy's small arms wrapped around his neck, and for a long moment, the sound of the city faded into quiet. Clara stepped closer, resting her hand gently on Cole's back. The warmth between them felt real, earned, fragile, but unbreakable. Outside, the snow began to fall again, not in fury this time, but softly, like forgiveness. When they finally stepped out of the shelter, Ethan ran ahead, laughing as snowflakes melted in his hair. Clara turned to Cole, her voice low. "It feels like the storm finally passed." He looked at her, the faintest smile curving at the edges of his mouth. "No," he said gently, "it just learned where to go." They watched the boy run beneath the streetlight, his small figure glowing golden against the white. In his pocket, the old note rested against the new one, past and present folded together, safe at last. Cole took Clara's hand as the winter grid lights pulsed once more across the skyline. The city glowed like a living thing, and somewhere deep in its hum, hope was breathing again. And as the snow fell, soft, endless, forgiving, he whispered the only words that mattered. "I'm here. Always."